I've touched on this in the AI space, but I think large language models bring on new opportunities and new challenges. So I think there are new opportunities with large language models. Like you've probably seen the launch of OpenAI's GPT-4o one, I think it is, or it's their kind of latest strawberry labeled model where they claim massive steps forward in interpreting molecular genetic information. Since I published my paper, there was a large language model, CRISPR design tool for designing CRISPR-Cas approaches. Again, these aren't regulatory approved tools, but they do show the potential of large language models in interpreting genomic omics data. And something we do discuss in the paper is the sounds a little bit like Star Trek medicine, but the use of large language models to design specific molecular approaches and molecular therapies and to actually do targeted design. So this is a little bit science fiction, but it's not entirely science fiction. Large language models, so we kind of think about large language models predominantly as interpreting human language, be it German or English, but obviously they can also interpret genomic language or even other omics disciplines and be applied in these spaces. The regulatory challenges are enormous. So I've addressed these in a number of other papers. If we focus a little bit on the clinical decision support systems in cancer, people have proposed such systems based upon large language models. So I'm kind of getting away from the molecular side and the DNA interpretation to the interpretation of symptoms and interpretation of disease planning. Large language models can superficially seem to do quite well on these tasks, but they can be incredibly unreliable as well. So a lot of the kind of headline, slightly non-serious assessment of these tools has been using multiple choice medical exams. On average, the tools do quite well, but they can do catastrophically badly. They can fail to interpret false information. They can hallucinate information. They have an almost infinite range of usability and flexibility, which is great, but that makes them very, very challenging to explore. If an individual asks questions in a very different way, an individual doctor using these tools in the future in clinical decision support, you can get a situation where you go down avenues of responses from these tools, which have not necessarily been explored in the testing. So I explored these challenges in a paper we published in June 2023, just a matter of months after the launch of the ChatGPT 3.5, a paper that we started writing just a matter of months after the launch in any case. And we address a whole series of these challenges, and also we address not only the challenges, how one could actually go about as a kind of roadmap to building a large language model for approval in medicine. I am on the side of this argument that does see the potential for large language models in decision support systems and even in molecular design for personalized drugs. But it's really important to remember that there are guardrails, there are frameworks which are important. If you want to bring a tool forward, being sure that you've tackled the question of determinism. These models are inherently non-deterministic. Even if you dial down their temperature to 0, they still give different answers based upon running on parallel architectures to the same question asked by the same person in 2 separate points in time. You log into 2 different computers, ask the same question, you get a different answer from these models. That is inherently asked questions about safety, which need to be addressed. Dealing with the question of, do you actually own and have control over the model that you're using? So if you run a model on GPT-4 as an API, you don't actually have control of that. The model changes around you. OpenAI changed that based upon feedback, which is in many realms of the use of that model. There are people designing medical devices based upon this technology without really understanding why that matters. But for obvious reasons, you need to test and show that your technology is safe. You can only do that if you actually have control that the thing I'm basing my answers on is static. It has a consistent reliability. It's not going to be dialed down in its performance. It's not going to change fundamentally from one day to the next, such that I go into work the next day and find all of the information provided to doctors has gone from being good the day before to being bad today. And that's within the realm of regulatory science, kind of common sense. but sometimes the enthusiasm in the general world for what these models can do gets a little bit ahead of itself and fails to deal with the boring. Does it work? Does it consistently work? Can I show that it worked? Can I investigate when I get a report from a patient or a doctor saying this tool was dangerous, it damaged my patient? Can I go back to an archive and say, well, I'm going to take the model off the shelf, run it again, explore why it went wrong, if it went wrong, why it went wrong, and how to fix it? At the moment, with large language models, you cannot do this. Certainly with the commercial closed models.